I say that the Secretary is committed to ensuring that we are truly advancing racial equity, I mean exactly that. Under her leadership and in alignment with President Biden's charge to advance racial equity, we are truly prioritized serving people who we know have been systemically underserved.
I am so honored to bring forward the new HUD czar, if you will. She is in charge of race and equity at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. She is sought after, and it's an honor that she allowed me to be her first interview. She's a soror, she's a Delta, one of the fine women of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I bring to you none other than Ajwa B. Asamoah. Ajwa, thank you so much for spending time with us. You on just the base of who you are, you believe in bringing equity and moving issues forward. You were one of you were the key proponent of the Crown Act federally. And now, because of your work, your equity work in the past, you've been brought into housing and urban development under Secretary Marcia Fudge to do this important work. What is the work that you are doing?
Well, first, let me just say thank you for everything that you do to ensure that our voices are really heard and that they're heard in a way that is truly authentic. Under the leadership of Secretary Fudge, we are doing amazing things here at HUD. I am extremely honored to be entrusted by her to serve as the Senior Advisor for Racial Equity. And even prior to me starting, so much had already happened, and it really is a testament to who she is. In my view, I view the Secretary as a fellow lifelong racial equity champion. She makes it known. She is unapologetically Black, and she leads in a way that is obviously for all of the American people, but she doesn't dismiss the fact that there are historical wrongs that have happened. And so being able to do this work in this way, under this leader and at this time is critically important, and I am so very honored to do it. In terms of my work, it's sort of threefold, if you will. So part of my work includes looking at our internal processes. And in the past, in prior administrations, some of the work has been focused on equality. And now with racial equity being a pillar, one of the 4 pillars really of the Biden-Harris administration, you see that being evident and apparent here at HUD. So part of my work is internal and amending our internal processes to ensure that racial equity is lifted and prioritized. Part of my work is in the policy shop. So I sit in the senior advisor suite, the senior policy advisor suite, and I'm tasked with advancing racial equity through policy development agency-wide. Some of the priorities, as you may know, for Madam Secretary includes really making home ownership a reality for all Americans, acknowledging, again, those historical and systemic, really, wrongs that have been done to certain groups of people.
1968, the Fair Housing Act became law. But the tentacles of racism still permeate, it sounds like, in almost every facet. The negative factors of racism and race are permeating in almost every facet when it comes to housing. Can you talk to me about that?
What I will say is that is something that Madam Secretary obviously takes very seriously. She is versed in that area. We know that, she's been a mayor and a member of Congress and a chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and, our leader, even prior to coming to HUD. And so she's led this work and been dedicated to ensuring that we are leveling the playing field as it relates to race and, wearing many of the hats that she has worn. But in terms of what is happening here, I just want to really reiterate, we know that home ownership is one of the primary ways to attain wealth. And that is a real priority for Madam Secretary, really making home ownership attainable, a reality for all of us, is something that she is very committed to doing. Strengthening and expanding the housing rights of all people, also something that she is very passionate about doing. Secretary Fudge is prioritizing taking proactive steps to fully enforce the Fair Housing Act and other civil rights laws to combat the discrimination that we know exists. And so when I say that there is so much happening here, I truly mean there is so much happening here. But just to touch on it, those are some of the things that we are working on under her leadership. Of course, prioritizing eviction and foreclosure prevention. It's still being worked on, so I'm not at liberty to the determining factors are still being considered, but I do know that it is also important for her to figure out ways to even acknowledge the burden, if you will, that the MIP, the mortgage insurance premium, has placed on certain borrowers. And so I don't know what the outcome will be, but I do know that that is also something that this team has been tasked with looking at how to potentially amend. Of course, we've launched PAVE, we've launched House America to ensure that we are tackling homelessness. That plan works to house folks who currently don't have housing under the American Rescue Plan. Again, just really prioritizing eviction and foreclosure prevention. Stood up a $5 billion home ARP program, meaning the American Rescue Plan. So much is happening here. It's hard to even try to condense it all in the confines of this interview. But when I say that the Secretary is committed to ensuring that we are truly advancing racial equity, I mean exactly that. Under her leadership and in alignment with President Biden's charge to advance racial equity, we are truly prioritized serving people who we know have been systemically underserved. And when I say systemically, I mean exactly that. Again, racial equity is seeking to right those historical wrongs, and we have to acknowledge the role that the government has played in creating them. And so to really actualize, if you will, the president's executive order, Madam Secretary has ensured that we have taken multiple bold steps to really remedy the past government sanctioned policies that have really perpetuated racial inequity. And, I'm honored to be able to do this work freely under a leader who gets it. You'll hear her often talk about how she lives in a predominantly Black community. Her lot is bigger, home well appointed, and she lives 2 doors down from a neighbor who's in an all-white community. You'll hear her say this herself. Yet her neighbor who lives in a predominantly white community, that home is appraised for more than her home. So we're bringing our lived experiences to this work. It's one thing to have, academic credentials and, expertise on a resume, but we are able to show up here under this leader, bringing our whole selves. Neither one of my parents own a home in this country. So I come to this work not as a lawyer. I'm not as someone who, worked on Capitol Hill. I didn't. I come to this work as an organizer, as someone who comes from the activist tradition, as someone who has, to your own point, has done so much outside of this, and Madam Secretary knows it. So you don't often get to see people who publicly identify as activists, as scholar activists, coming from the tradition of really organizing in these seats. So again, it just really speaks to who she is, to be intentional about building a team of people she trusts to actually advance racial equity in the government under this administration.
So your mom and dad own homes in Africa or a home in Africa, or no?
No, my mom was actually born here in the States, in the Jim Crow South. My dad was born under colonization in what would become the Republic of Ghana. And so, yes, he does own a home there, but not here in this country. And so those barriers to home ownership are the very things that we are working to make sure that we are removing so that our people have a fighting shot, Black and brown. Because racial equity, is not synonymous with Black. There are other groups of people, of course, who have been systemically marginalized, including the indigenous community, our brown folks as well. And so we are able to do that under a leader who truly gets it.
What committees are you working with, or congressional leaders you're working with on your work?
So to date, I'm still relatively new, haven't even been here a good 80 days. And so I am still building rapport. And so I have colleagues who work on our congressional affairs. So my work has been focused as of right now, sort of inside of the agency, but also working with my colleagues, my counterparts, I should say, in other agencies. And so I've developed a great rapport with the counselor for racial equity over at Treasury, because so much of that actually overlaps. And so we're being thoughtful, very intentional about relationship building and figuring out how we do this work collaboratively to really move things for the American people.